and maybe we won't see a potential starting quarterback at Auburn. They might not be picking a number for Peyton Thorne this week because we don't know who's going to start at Auburn. And well, let's hear what Hugh Freeze had to say on Monday.
The struggle with it's really hard to not play a young man, whether it's Peyton or whoever else it is. It's really hard for me to not play a young man that consistently is the best performer in practice over and over and over and over again, and his execution of the offense, which has been pretty clear to all of us that throughout camp and throughout the practice weeks and everything, his performance and his understanding of what we want to do has been better than the others. And if you do that, then you kind of send a message that practice really doesn't matter. Having said that, you have to carry that over into the games. You have to. And I did witness him play really, really good football in some big games last year. We've also witnessed the opposite of that in some games.
So this was not what anybody wanted, and Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions. Hugh Freeze in the press conference on Monday went through all 4 interceptions, and there were a couple that you could have maybe put on somebody else, but there were a couple that were just on Peyton Thorne, and you can sense the frustration in Hugh Freeze. And I understand why coaches feel this way, because this has got to be hard. We see them on Saturdays. We see the team on Saturdays, the product on Saturdays, and we're like, look, the results are all that matter. But these guys are in it every day. And so if somebody 5 days a week does all the right things, it's very hard to say you're not that guy on Saturday. But it's happened before. I'll date myself here, and this is when I was in high school, but then I learned more about this as I got to know some of these people when I was older. Danny Werfel at Florida, who ended up winning the Heisman Trophy in 1996. Danny Werfel, when he was younger, when he was like a redshirt freshman and a sophomore, would come into games and just be spectacular, lights out. And it's like, why? Terry Dean was the player who was starting at the time. And it's like, why isn't Danny Werfel the starter? Well, because Terry Dean outplayed him at practice almost every day. And it wasn't until Steve Spurrier finally just said they lost to Auburn at one point. It all comes back to Auburn. But they lost to Auburn, and Danny had come in late in the game and been great. And Spurrier's finally like, look, I just got to go with the guy who wins game, who's better in the games, because ultimately that's the job. But it's so hard when most of the days of the week, this one guy is better.
Well, I mean, like, honestly, how often do you think that's even the case?
It happens probably every year. It happens somewhere at some school.
Yeah, because the concept of gamer is just an interesting.
Well, Urban Meyer used to talk about that. He's like, there's no such thing as a gamer, because if he doesn't show in practice, it won't show in the games. But that's also not true. And he would tell you, he'd be the first to tell you, if there's a guy who just shows up when the lights come on, you play him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you have to be. Well, and the thing that's hard, Andy, is that you can't discover who's a gamer without putting him in the game. So, like, the Peyton Thorne scenario here is Hank Brown's the backup, right?
Right.
So, like, we're talking about a 3-star prospect who's been in the program for 1 year.
Right.
Like, that could be great, or that could be we need 3 more years of development before he's ready to go. Now, I think there's an overarching theme here, and we don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. And you could sense, like you said, the frustration on Hugh Freeze's face and demeanor. But why is Auburn in the position that it's in to begin with?
Yes.
That's the whole thing. I do think that a lot of times we get not bogged down, but we find ourselves in conversations during the year about how could we be in this position. But we also have to analyze that Hugh Freeze came to Auburn as the master corrector of their ails, which was getting good players is important.
And what's crazy is he also took a former Auburn quarterback and turned him into a 2nd-round pick at Liberty, Malik Willis.
Yeah.
So that's the part that's crazy. But so we talked about our friend Stephen Godfrey joking over the weekend that for once Hugh Freeze is getting in trouble for not paying the player. But he said, Hugh Freeze was very clear on this in the offseason. I believe it was the last offseason too. he did not want to pay 7 figures out of the portal for a quarterback because, and I understand where he's coming from on this, because that also brings in a set of expectations, a set of circumstances, and I just don't know, like, because
That's what they cost, Andy.
I know, but then
Okay.
do you have to play them? Because we're seeing this at Florida State. We're seeing this play out at Florida State. Like, do you have to play them at that point, or can you just give them the quick hook if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult, but it's kind of like pro sports. I mean, what do you do with your franchise player and how, I mean, like, you play the best player. I mean, the point, like you said, is to win the game. So, I mean, I think that you have to evaluate the same way you do when you're bringing anyone else in. And
if it doesn't
if
work,
it
just
doesn't work,
understand
it doesn't work.
it's a sunk
that's
cost.
it's also the
Yeah.
peril of the business. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like anybody who spends a bunch of money is having 100% hit rate. So I do think that you do have to go down the rabbit hole of, like, if you have a young, promising player and I mean, I think what we're talking about in Florida State is the perfect example. It's like, does Brock Glenn have any hope of being a good player, or did we give up because he got thrust into an impossible situation last year?
I actually think about what we're talking about at Florida.
Yeah,
Is the
Florida.
same-
Yeah,
because whether it's money spent on a back or on a transfer quarterback or money spent on a freshman quarterback, it's still money spent on somebody who may or may not be playing. Like, DJ Lagway is the highest paid player at Florida. And we've been debating about whether they're going to start him against Texas A&M or not. You know how I feel about that. Like, the only sensible solution is starting DJ Lagway, but that might not be what Billy Napier chooses. I also think the only sensible solution for Mike Norvell is give Brock Glenn a chance, because it's not working with DJU.
yeah. That is 100%. It's almost like the same exact situation. I mean, it's a little bit different because DJ is a star and Brock Glenn was kind of, I mean, he was an Elite 11 kid. Like, it wasn't like he's nobody, but DJ Lagway is somebody who is supposed to be a transcendent talent that changes a program. And I'm not sure that Brock Glenn came into Florida State with the same
but that's the thing. You keep going back to recruiting. If we're going to do that, Graham Mertz, when he came to Wisconsin, was supposed to be a transcendent program-changing quarterback.
I'm not saying that. I think that both the answers to the question is play the kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I agree with you on that, but I'm saying the pressure at Florida is higher because of the way that he was perceived. I mean, so was DJ. I mean, like, it's not like in the recruiting ranks, he was a 5-star kid too.
We can't mix up our DJs. DJ Uyunglele.
Oh yeah, sorry, DJU. But you know, the thing that is, to wrap it back around to what we were talking about, Auburn doesn't have either of those things.
No, but I've seen Hugh Freeze do enough with quarterbacks who might not have been the greatest talent-wise. So I had this conversation with Hugh Freeze after he took the Auburn job. He came to the Senior Bowl to visit some people, and a bunch of us were talking to him. We were interviewing him, and after the interview was over, a couple of us were chatting with him, and he brought up the point that the most important early guy he brought in Ole Miss was Bo Wallace. And I think most people would say, oh, it was Laramie Tunsil, it was Robert Kondichi, or maybe it was Denzel Kondichi, which allowed you to get Robert and some of those other guys. But he said it was Bo Wallace because it allowed him to run the offense the way he wanted to run it. And I think we can go out on a limb and say he still hasn't found his Bo Wallace at Auburn yet. And that's the biggest issue right now, is they can't run the offense the way he wants to run it. And we've seen it run effectively with everywhere else he's been. So could Hank Brown be that guy? He's watched a lot of practices and determined that maybe he's not, but I think he's going to have to give him a chance. So let's hear a little more from Hugh Freeze on Monday.
He's the highest performer in practice and preparation, which obviously has led to us giving him the starting nod. And but there's got to be carryover into the game, and I think it was John Wooden that once said that he spoke directly about this and honoring the practice and stuff. But again, sometimes adjustments have to be made, and I assure you we're prepared if that continues. We have to go another direction.
See that, and that's the most definitive statement that we've heard from anybody. Like, Norvell hasn't said anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Napier has kind of waffled and equivocated. Like, we have not heard anybody in this situation so far this year say it that directly, like that bluntly. We're going to have to make a change because our job's to win the game. It's not to play the best practice player.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to even break down who looked the best in practice in such a definitive way, I think gives you some insight into the struggle that he's having. Like,
Yeah.
When it comes to Florida, Andy, I don't know what the struggle is.
No, that's an easy decision, I think.
Yeah.
And I actually think, because we always talk about, will a coach lose the locker room if they make this decision? Like, I don't think Hugh Freeze is in any danger of losing the locker room if he changes, because players understand. Players all want to win. Like, I don't think Billy Napier's in any danger of losing the locker room if he starts DJ Lagway.
Yeah.
Players aren't dumb. Like, I always go back to when Dabo benched Kelly Bryant and started Trevor Lawrence. And I remember talking to Christian Wilkins later that season about that day. And like, Christian Wilkins like picked up Trevor Lawrence and took him out to breakfast that morning and basically was saying, everybody's behind you. Do not worry about this. There will be no dissension when this decision is made public. We got you. Because players aren't stupid. Like, they understand Trevor Lawrence gave them the best chance to win. And
you could lose a locker room by sticking with the wrong guy for too long, too.
Agreed. Yeah. I think that's a bigger danger in that case. Now, it's the dynamics can get weird sometimes, but I don't think they're weird in any of these cases. I think all of these situations are situations where these teams had big expectations. So far, it has been a disaster, and you have to figure it out. So we will find out, but I am very curious to see what Hugh Freeze does here because, again, he said it more bluntly than anybody else. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.